Hello everyone. So Daniel has it has been 2 to 3 days since Daniel is no more with us. It's a it's a very shocking news. When I first heard about this news, I simply lost my mind. I like he was a great teacher. Players used to call him Sensei. He was a great commentator, one of the best players, the best player in Bullet, Hyper Bullet. Very friendly, very nice, and yeah, very kind. But yeah, so in this video, I have taken one of the games. Like, it can't be I won't say this is the best game that he played, but this is one of the most craziest way. And this game basically tells us why he was a great sensei. This game will simply display how he handled crazy possession into a win. And he has the capability, and he was definitely one of the strongest chess player in the world. And I hope you guys must love this. So this game was played between Daniel Naroditsky versus Liam from 2021 during COVID-19. Aim Chess Rapid. I hope that you guys enjoy the analysis of the game and appreciate Daniel Naroditsky's knowledge. Because and make sure to check out his channel. The videos he uploaded for beginners, intermediate, advanced player, which are very knowledgeable, and he truly deserves to be the sensei. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Let's begin. Okay, so Daniel was playing with the white pieces. Liam was playing with the black pieces. This game is from the Aim Chess Rapid, played in 2021. Daniel started the game with 1b3. We have d5, bishop b2, bishop to f5, d3, knight f6, knight d2, e6, and g3. So this is an opening which I regularly play in Bullet because it's a very flexible system. You are finishing your bishop on both the diagonals, which is a great opening, very flexible opening. It doesn't matter whatever your opponent plays, you can still play this position, play this setup. g3, we have h6, bishop to g2, bishop h7. So a very basic setup chosen by Liam. He's putting the pawn in the center, developing the light square bishop, playing bishop to h7 as e4 is going to come up. Black can't really stop it. e4, and now we have to move a5 by Liam. So it's a typical idea in such positions. Black goes for playing the move a5, a4, trying to open up the rook on the a file. Though it was not the correct way to play this particular move in this particular position. A better move would have been to simply play bishop e7, simply keep on playing some basic chess, developing a piece, castle up, and black is having a fine position. But after a5, there's a very strong move that is coming up from the white side. You can try to pause the video and try to find the best move for white. Okay, so in this position, the best continuation for white to punish a5 would be to play the move e cross d5. And basically now black is having two ways to capture the pawn, with the pawn or with the knight. If black goes for capturing the pawn with the knight, we are already very happy. Now black has sort of lost his central control. The bishop on g2 is a very nice piece, opened up, and now white is already happy. I can play the move like a3 now. a4 can be met with b4, expanding on the queen side if necessary. Though c4 is not really necessary, but my bishop on g2 is very happy, and I'm loving this position for white. If black takes back the pawn with the e pawn, now comes the move queen e2 check, and this is the key idea. After queen e2 check, let's say if queen e7, there is bishop f6. You can't take with the queen because the queen is pinned up. You have to take with the g pawn, and now I can play the move stuff like bishop d5. I'm a pawn up. So let's say black plays a move like bishop e7. I can still take on f6, gf6. Now the king side pawn structure is absolutely gone. Black can't really castle up on the short side. I can play the move like knight h3, castle up, put the knight on f4, which is a very nice square for the knight. The pawns on the king side are extremely weak. The pawn on d5 is a bit weak. I can play c4 in the future. I'm already loving this position for white. This would have been the best reply for white, but instead Daniel played the move a3. which is a very human move. A4, and once again the same tactics was coming up with ED. Though he played the move b4 now, and now we have the move c5 by Lee Kuan Liam. Now instead of c5, once again the normal move would have been to play a move like bishop to e7, simply developing the pieces. But instead, black went for the move c5, Lee Kuan Liam, which he's trying to complicate the matters a bit, but it's not really working in his favor, because after c5, now Daniel Naroditsky finally found the move ed, which is the best move. After ed, Lee Kuan Liam went on to make the position even more chaotic with c cross b4. Now, if Lee Kuan Liam would have gone for capturing the d pawn, let's say there are two ways with the pawn or with the knight. If you go for capturing the pawn with the e pawn, which looks a very natural move, there is queen e2 check. Let's say queen e7. I can take on f6, trade off the queen, and play the move just b cross c5. On the next move, I'm going to chop off the pawn on d5. I'm pawn up, I'm loving with the position, and yeah, I'm pretty happy. Going back, if black plays a move like bishop e7, now comes the most important move, bishop f6, gf6, and now b5, which is a very strong idea. After b5, you basically stopping black to put his knight on c6, because once the knight comes on c6, the knight wants to jump on d4, attacking the queen. So after b5, we are basically taking away the c6 square from the knight, also grabbing space on the queen side. Maybe the idea could be to play the move c4 in the future, opening up the g bishop on a very nice diagonal. So it's the whole idea. And after b5, you're also taking away the a6 square from the rook, which is a very critical move that is going to come up in the future. Instead, at the place of going for all this stuff, for example, if black goes for taking the pawn with the knight, now we have the move b5 once again with the same idea of taking away the c6 square from the knight. And once again, white is having an absolutely fine position. Black has sort of lost his center control. I'm also having c4 in the future, opening up the diagonal for the bishop on g2. And once again, I'm loving this position for white. Going back, instead, let's say if exactly in the game we had c cross b4, complicating the matters, and now we have the move d cross e6, and now we have b cross a3 by Lee Kuan Liam. Now in this position, the best continuation would have been to play the move e cross f7 check, which looks a very natural move at the first glance, but after king f7, you try to wonder, okay, if I try to go play like bishop a3, rook a3, there is already queen e7. It's a check and I lose the rook and the game. So it's not so easy. Though after king f7, white needs to find the move bishop cross f6, which is definitely not an easy move because you are giving up your good bishop for a horrible knight. And the point here is after g cross f6, white can play knight e2 and white can castle up, and material wise it's even. The b pawn is a bit soft, a knight is jumping on c4, white is having absolutely pieces on their best square, and white is simply better. Very hard to judge. Instead we have bishop a3, rook a3, and now queen e7, attacking the rook on a3 and also attacking the pawn on e6. Now we have the move knight c4. Now knight c4 was a mistake, and the reason is quite deep. Basically after knight c4, black would love to like in the game we had the move rook a6, and this is the main reason why knight c4 was a bad move, because after knight c4, after rook a6, now black would love to play the move b5, attacking the knight, as there is no rook on a2 hanging up, so b5 is a very strong move for black. So instead, if white would have played the move queen a1, there is no knight on c4, so after rook a6, bishop h3, trying to defend the pawn. After b5, there is no knight hanging on c4, so white is basically not losing move. White can simply develop his other pieces and white is absolutely fine and better. Instead, we have the move knight c4, rook a6, and now knight e2. And like if still bishop h3, now b5, queen b1, let's say if black takes, white wants to take the knight on b8, there is simply b4. And black's pawn is simply going forward, it's already better for black. So that's why we have the move knight e2 by Daniel, b5, queen b1, and basically now if you try to go for capturing the knight in this position, queen cross b8 simply wins, as after queen here, there is queen b5 check, and black loses the rook and the game. So instead we have the move queen to c5. Now in this position, the best move was to play the move rook cross e6, giving up the b pawn, which is absolutely not easy. You're giving up the b pawn, and the whole idea here is after knight b to d7, bishop f3, as black is simply threatening to capture the knight on e2. You have to defend it. After castle up, you see it's not easy to play with white. You castle up, black is going to give up the rook for 2 minor pieces, which is very good for black, and black is already very happy. But instead, as we are humans, it's very hard. Like, black is having 2 pawns on the queen side, so black played the move queen c5, which is a very human move, trying to defend the pawn. And now comes the move, very strong. Now, from here, the real Daniel Naroditsky game begins, which is d4. Giving up the knight, and black have to take it. And now comes the move rook c3. Like, you move the queen, like, the queen is first of all not really having many squares. But basically the threat is to simply simply go for rook c8 check and go for capturing the knight, capturing the rook. So black is once again forced to take the pawn on e6. And now comes the move queen cross b5 check. It's a check. You play knight d7, rook c8 and go for capturing the rook. White is already winning. You play queen d7, still rook c8 is coming up. You can't take the rook because the queen is pinned. And once again, after king e7, queen e7, knight e7, rook h8, and white is simply winning. So that's why we have the move king e7. And now comes the move rook e3, attacking the queen and the king. Now we have the move knight e4, bishop e4, and now comes the move d5. You take with the bishop, you lose the queen. You take with the queen, I take the queen. You can't take the queen because the bishop is pinned. The queen is simply attacked. The queen has to move. Let's say if black tries queen e5. Now queen check, and once again the bishop is going to hang up and white is completely winning. We have the move queen to b6. Rook takes the bishop, giving a check. The king comes forward, and now comes queen cross b6 check. Not the best move played by Daniel. In this position, a better move would have been queen c4, because the whole idea here is, it's a very basic theme. Whenever your king is weak, is in the center, always try to keep maximum pieces, especially queens, on the board to attack the black king. Though it's not easy, as Daniel must have thought after queen b1 check, he's losing the rook. But now comes the move knight c3, knight b5 is coming up, and soon the black king is going to get checkmated and white is simply winning. Instead, queen b6, a very human move, rook b6, knight c3, protecting the pawn. We have the move a3, king d2, trying to get the final piece into the game, which is the h rook, rook a6, rook a1, knight d7, and rook a4. Takes, and now we have the move knight e5. If black goes for playing the move rook a8, there's rook a3, and after knight c5 you are thinking, okay, black is going to win a piece because you take, you lose the rook. But there is knight c3, or you can even go knight b6 with the same idea of knight c4 and knight b5. For example, if knight c3, rook a3, there is knight b5 check. I capture the rook, and white is going to press this game, and maybe it's very hard to play with the black pieces to hold a draw. White is a pawn up, and white is definitely going to press and eventually win the game. Instead, we have the move knight e5. You can't really take the pawn on a3 because there is knight c4 coming up, and you lose the game. So f4 first, knight c4 check, king c3, rook c8, and now king d4, protecting the pawn on d5. Knight b2, and now we have the move knight to b6. Once again, you need to be sharp. You can't take on a3 because it's a check and you lose the knight and the game. So instead we have knight to b6, takes, check, and now we have the move rook c2. If black goes for capturing the pawn on h2, now the winning move is not rook a7 but rook a2. And now it's winning. For example, rook d2, I just take the knight. You take it, I give it check, I capture the rook, and I win the game. Instead, we have the move rook c2, and now we have rook a7. But once again in this position, still rook a2 is working up with the same idea of playing rook b2, and knight c4 wins. For example, if black tries to move the king, Now I can simply play the move d6 check, forcing black to take, and now rook b2. Rook b2, knight c4 check, and once again I win the game. So going back, instead we have the move rook a7, rook c7, and playing the move rook a6, not trading off the rooks because Daniel is also not sure, even the engine is not sure if it's winning or not. We have rook b7, king e4, king comes forward, knight goes to c8, check, and now king f3. You can't go forward with king e5 because there is a check, and there are a couple of checks coming up, and eventually the game is a draw. So instead we have the move king f3, king takes the pawn, and now white has got some crazy position with knight e7 check and knight f5, and somehow white has got all his pieces on the king side and black's all pieces are on the queen side. White is already winning. It's a check, king goes to g4, and basically two pawns are hanging up. You move the g pawn, you lose the h pawn, or else you lose the g pawn, that's game losing. So we have a check, and now king h4. You can't take the pawn on h5 because there is a g6 check. So we have the move king h4, and now knight to d3, and white simply took the pawn on g7. Now in this position, if black would have tried to play the move g6 in this position, there is knight d6 check, and once again white simply take the pawn on f7 on the next move, take the pawn on g6 on the other move, and eventually win the game. So we have the move knight d3, white took the pawn, rook goes to b2, h3, rook goes to h2, knight takes the pawn, knight goes to f2, threatening to capture the pawn on h3, but now comes g4, giving up the pawn, and eventually white pushes up some moves passed away, and now we have the move g5, king goes to c4, and now we have knight g7, which was all mistake. In this position, the winning move would have been to play the move rook a7. The idea is to simply take. So after, let's say, knight d6 check, giving a check and also protecting the pawn. After king f6, rook f1, check, and white can sack the rook for the knight. And now this pawn is just inevitable, and for example in this position, when you have this position, the knight defends the pawn, and eventually white wins the game. Instead we have knight g7 check. In this position, somehow it's still hard to play with the black pieces. King b5 is showing the best move, but still black has to find some series of good move, which is very hard. We have knight d6 check, king goes to f3, rook f1, and rook cross g6, which was a blunder. Instead, white should have played knight h5, simply defending the pawn, and with the same idea of capturing the knight on the next move, taking the pawn and making the queen. But we have rook cross d6, and now king cross d6. If black takes the pawn, there is knight f5, which defends the rook, and if you try to go for this endgame, this is just winning for white. So in this position, after rook d6, king d6, there is f5, and now black's having only one move to draw the game, or all the other moves are losing for black. Try to pause the video and try to find the only drawish move for black. Okay, so the only move for black to hold the game to a draw is to play the move rook g1. If you found the move, congratulations. The whole point here is, if white takes the pawn, black takes the pawn on g5, I'm going to sack the rook for the another pawn, and the game is a draw. You try to push g6, I can still take, and that's a draw. So that's the whole idea, and white can't really do anything. If you try to, for example, play knight h5, something like this, I can just try to get the king near the pawns, and you eventually have to do something, and black just take the pawn, and that's a draw. So instead, at the place of rook g1, Liam played the move rook a1, which turned out to be a blunder, because after king f7, king here, push, king goes back, king over here, and now king e5. For example, if rook b6, white just wants to push, you can't take because you lose the game. So we have to move king e5, king g6, a check, over here push, and now in this position, once again, white needs to be extremely sharp. If f8 queen, it's a draw. It's a draw. If you go over here, I capture the queen, and that's a draw. So instead, Daniel is very sharp. He played the move knight f6 check, king here, and once again, if you try to make a queen, it's still winning, but you have to figure it out the rook versus queen endgame, which is still winning. But instead, he played the move knight h7, attacking the rook, check here, and after king h5, Liam resigned the game. because there is no way for the rook to defend the queen anyhow. If you try to move here, threatening mate in 1, after f8 queen, it's a check. The king has to move, and eventually white wins the game. So that's why after king h5, Liam decides to resign the game, and Daniel Naroditsky win the game. It was a very crazy game. I'm not sure if it's the best game or not, because many other channels have posted some other game, but definitely those games were also amazing. But I wanted to show some real chess, some crazy possessions, because Daniel was a very good streamer, and most importantly, he was a very good teacher. He's also known as Sensei, because eventually his playing style is more like playing a positional chess. He loves to attack, and he did. Even in crazy positions, he navigated the path and eventually just converted a winning position. He basically had a winning position in the opening, in the middle game, and eventually converted that in the end game. So basically the game was extremely complicated, but it was very much fun. And yeah, I hope that you guys must have loved it. And yeah, it's very sad news. It's definitely for the chess world. Daniel was one of my favorite, definitely the best chess commentator, because like whenever he was basically there's a tournament going on and he is one of the commentator, I would have loved to watch. Basically, I always watch those tournament whenever Daniel is commentating, but we can't do anything. So yeah, that's it. I hope that you guys must have loved the game, enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure to like, share, and smash that subscribe button. Thank you for watching. I'm going to see you soon in the next one, and bye bye.